Hi everyone, it's Mike, and this is just a short story about a ship I sailed on called the Lobo, which means the wolf in Spanish. El Lobo in Spanish means wolf, and I don't know how the Spanish thing came in on this ship. It's rather strange, because it was built in Great Britain, the ship. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I went away to sea. When I left school, I went to catering college for a year, and I went away to sea. There's my seaman's books, as you can see, and inside my seaman's books you'll see a picture of me there, as you can see, a picture of me in there, and it tells you in there that I went away. Sorry, not went away. I went to a college called the Nautical Catering College for 1 year, as you can see there. The Nautical Catering College for 1 year, and went away to sea. Obviously, I hoped to be promoted to become a cook, a chief cook, but never really made it, and that's another story, But anyway, I went away to sea, and the first ships I sailed on were 3 ships called the Tongariro, the Oteo, and the Northumberland. But they were only rock dodgers, what we call rock dodgers. I only went round the coast on them for a week or 2 weeks, while they were loading up cargo. Maybe 2 weeks before the crew came back. Sometimes it'd be 3 weeks. And then the crew would come back after being on leave, and they'd come on to the ships, go deep sea, and we'd come off the ships. But the first ship I went on, which was deep sea, which means I went away to sea, I sailed across the Atlantic and stuff like that. It's called the Lobo, as you can see there. I've got my finger by it, the Lobo. I don't think you'll see that because it's rather worn out. I was on that ship for nearly 3 months, and I thought it was a great ship, It was 12,000 tons, pretty big ship, 12,000 tons, nothing like the tankers of today, over 100,000 tons. But this was 1970, and life was, everything was brand new to me. I was only 17 years old at the time, 16 or 17 years old. I think it was 17, and 16. I think it was 16, and it was fantastic. But I never realised at the time, because when you're 16, you're very naive, and it's very dangerous away at sea. Because some ships you can get the odd psychopath on them, and these people wouldn't think twice about throwing you over the side, So you do get a lot of bad people on ships, and not only that, not a lot, but a couple. Most of them are okay, but the worst thing about going away to sea is the alcohol to drink. That causes a hell of a lot of trouble at sea. When you've got 30 men on a ship, 30 men on a ship, and they're away with each other for months on end in such a small proximity with each other, even though the ships are large, you're only rarely in a small proximity with each other most of the time, so you get on each other's nerves. So when the men get drunk, they tend to fight amongst each other, but that's another story. So you've really got to be able to look after yourself at sea, not so much as physically, but mentally. You've got to watch what you're doing, and this is the way things are. So that was a great ship, the Lobo. It even had a swimming pool on it. I'll show you the picture of the ship. Obviously, I'll put a picture in now and show you the swimming pool. And it was a pretty big ship, and it had a centre castle that was in the middle of the ship. In the middle of the ship, the centre castle. Now, the centre castle was in the middle of the ship, and the aft accommodation was at the end of the ship. Now, the engineers lived in the aft accommodation, and the crew, but the chief engineer, I think, lived in the centre castle with the captain and the officers, the mate, the second mate and the third mate, and the fourth mate, and cadet officers and whatever. And they lived in the centre castle. Now, in the centre castle, obviously, because I was a catering boy, I used to clean up there as well. I used to take things up, meals up, stuff such like, for the captain and whatever. That was one of my duties, and it was a beautiful ship. the actual, in the centre castle there was a bar, where the officers sat and drank, and where the chief and second engineer, so I think the second engineer was up there as well, sat and drank, and and the other engineers could go up there if they want, because they're officers. So it was an officers' bar, not just for the crew officers, but also for the engineering officers. And there was a mirror on the wall. It was massive. It must have been 10 foot wide by 5 foot high, maybe a bit less than that. But emblazoned into the centre of this mirror, with countryside surrounding it, was this fox. But it had been done in such a way that you could see yourself in the mirror. But this was like cut into the mirror, and it was beautiful. I don't know how they done it. And I don't know why a Spanish name. They named the ship the Lobo, because it was built in Great Britain. There must have been a reason behind it. Anyway, like I've said, I don't know if I mentioned it before, a Lobo is Spanish for wolf. And it says in the Bible, doesn't it, about the wolf? The wolf's always been looked upon as an evil animal in folklore, but it isn't really. The wolf, Christ said on the Sermon on the Mount, I think it was Christ, I think Christ said this on the Sermon on the Mount. Correct me if I'm wrong. Beware of false prophets. This is in the Bible, obviously, in the New Testament. Beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. So the wolf has always had a bad name. I mean, would you like to be surrounded by wolves in a forest on your own, by a load of wolves? You wouldn't, would you? And I always thought, that's a bit creepy. That it's a beautiful mirror and all this, but it's a little bit creepy because it means the wolf. And it was a great ship. I thought it was great. Anyway, on my first voyage on this ship, we had to pull into Curacao. I don't know whether we were going to unload fuel in Curacao. I'm not sure. Because of engine problems, salt had got into the salt water, and salt water had gone into the boilers. So they had to fly engineers out to fix it. And whilst we were there, the first week we were there, I think we were there for 2 or 3 weeks. In the first week we were there with engine problems, the Empress of Canada came in, and we were there maybe a week, 10 days. The Empress of Canada came in and docked about a quarter of a mile away from us, over the other side of the bay, in Curaçao's town, which is called Willemstad. It's obviously a Dutch name because Curaçao was a Dutch colony, and everything's named after the Dutch there. It's got Dutch built houses there. I don't know whether there's still Dutch people living there or not, but now it's like a bit of a holiday resort. But tankers go in there. It's got a big tanker berth there, And ships, like passenger ships, come in, and probably cargo ships as well. Passenger ships come in for what's called bunkers, for to load up with stores and such like, and get fueled up. But anyway, to cut a long story short, Dickie Spring, who was on our ship, he was the messman, a great guy, because I worked as a catering boy and in the galley, and he was in the mess room, which was right next to the galley. And he was a great guy, and I got on great with Dickie, and I also used to help him clean up in the mess room as well. He was the mess man. In other words, the crew's mess is where the crew have their meals. It's the dining hall for the crew, but it's a mess room as well. They come in there in their break and such like, and they can sit there during the day playing cards or whatever, And that's the way it was. Not like the officers. They had an officers' saloon, like an officers' dining place. Silver knives and forks and the best of everything, and they come down in their white uniforms with their lapels on, to have their meals, but they were officers, Anyway, to cut a long story short, Dick said, I'm going over to that Empress of Canada because I've got a load of mates on there. So we went over there to see Dick's mates. There was me, another guy, and Dickie Spring. So we went over there in the taxi. And we went into the ship's crew room there, the passenger ship's crew room. It was a massive passenger ship, but only small by today's standards, but it looked big then. It was 27,000 tons, which is only small today because passenger ships are over 100,000 tons. Not all of them, but a lot of them. But it still had over a 400 crew, 450 crew, such like, and lots of passengers. I don't know what the passage was carried. It was well over 1,000. Well, it must have been 1,000 or thereabouts or over. Anyway, to cut a long story, it must have been well over that, maybe 2,000. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we went in the bar and we had some drinks, and I never drank much because I never had much money to buy any booze, you know. But Dickie Spring got really drunk. And we looked at our money, and we obviously, the bar was going to shut down. We had to get off because these guys had to go back to work or whatever. So Dickie's mates, you know, the crew members of the Empress of Canada, the cooks and stewards, whatever, or seamen. So we said, look, we're going to have to go back, and we never had enough money. So Dickie Spring said, well, look, I'm not walking back. I'm going to swim back, because it was only a quarter of a mile away on the other side of the bay, but to walk back was about 3 or 4 miles through all the dock complexes. So he said, I'm not walking back there. It took us ages to get here in a taxi. So I said, well, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to swim back. I said, you can't do that. And anyway, all the crew started egging him on, his friends. So we walked up to I think it was the passenger deck, you know, which was honestly 60 feet up from the water, 60 or 70 feet up, 5 stories up, at least, from the water. And I'm not sure he went on the top deck of the passenger deck, on the aft end of the ship, at the back of the ship, or the deck underneath. But anyway, we went up, and they were all egging him on to dive in. And I tried to stop him, but they restrained me, because I was only 16. They restrained me and stopped me and told me to mind my own business. And Dick got up onto this, you know, it was about 6 or 7 inches wide, piece of wood which was covered the rail, you know, the rails, the ship's rails. And it's made out of teak or something like that, which is resistant to water and wearing time. And he stood on this rail and he dived in. They thought he was going to jump in, because they said, go on, jump in now, jump in. But he never, instead of jumping in, Dick decided to dive in. But he didn't dive in the way you'd normally dive, right? Which is like that, and you dive straight. He crouched down, right? Crouched right down until he was nearly sitting on the bar. Well, not that far, but not far. And till he was nearly sitting on the top of this rail, and he dove in. And now, instead of going down straight in the water like that with his hands, he didn't. He went over backwards, right at an angle, and ended up on his back. But it was such a distance that he dived from, 60 or 70 feet, that his head went back as he hit the water and broke his neck. Of course, we didn't know that at the time. I looked over the side, I saw him swimming. Then one of the senior crew came up and chased us off that deck, because it was a passenger deck. So we had to go down, so we didn't watch him. But I saw him swim. And we went back to our ship, and somebody in the end, we did have enough money, me and this other lad, or one of the crew gave us some money, and we could afford the taxi back, so we got a taxi back to our ship, which took about 20 minutes. And we were looking over the side of the ship, and we saw that a lifeboat had come down off the ship, a large lifeboat, and there were people in the lifeboat. They'd obviously got Dick's body and put it into the gunport door at the side of the ship, lifted it up into the gunport door, or I took it to the quayside, but they probably put it into the gunport door, because they probably threw a rope ladder down, or a rope, and got it under his arms and pulled him in. But anyway, you know, the doctor certified on the Empress of Canada, because passenger ships carry a doctor, you know, he'd broken his neck. So anyway, this lifeboat came over to our ship, and we had to throw down what was called a rope ladder for the officers on this lifeboat. I think there was 2 of them and an able seaman, or 3 of them and an able seaman, to get up on to our ship, and then they went up to the officers' bar, which is in the centre castle where the mirror was, and to speak to our captain and the chief officer on our ship and the captain. And then we got called up, and I gave my story, and the others did, as what we saw, what happened. Anyway, I wasn't drunk, because I didn't drink much, but you know, this is alcohol for you, alcohol, you know. it causes a lot of trouble at sea, men fighting amongst each other through alcohol and such like. And it's a dangerous place anyway at sea. You've got to be on your toes and you've got to have your wits about you, especially if you get a psychopath on the ship, because they'll throw you over the side when you're not looking at you, leaning over the side having a smoke. You know, just lean on the railings, they'll throw you over if they get a chance. But anyway, it's a dodgy place at sea, so you've got to really be careful, you know, because a lot of people have been murdered at sea, you know. And I said one of the main causes is alcohol. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we buried Dick in Curacao because his family couldn't afford to bring him back, or they requested that he be buried there. So I was one of the coffin bearers. I remember the coffin biting into my shoulder. And I remember these big insects flying around because it was a tropical country, you know, in the Caribbean, tropical islands. They looked like helicopters, you know, massive insects with stems that were black and yellow. And I thought, God, I hope that one of them doesn't sting me. But the worst thing about that was the actuality of what was happening. I couldn't understand. You know, I was only 16, you know, and I thought, my God, what's happening here? I can't believe what's going on here. I was 16, 17, or nearly 17. I couldn't believe what was going on. My first trip away to sea, and this happens with a guy who I got to know was a great guy, all because of the drink. You know, anyway, we buried Dick there, and he wasn't buried actually. Over there, they have like walls, and you slide the coffins into the compartment in the wall, and then they put a thing over it. They've got them in America, you know, like a front with his name and all that on. They have these over in America. You know, if I could ever afford it, I'd love to have gone over there, you know, and, you know, visited Dick's grave. If it should still be there. But they may have brought him back, I'm not sure, but I don't think they did. And I've never had the money to go over there, because it's a beautiful place anyway, you know. It's a bit of a resort now, Curacao. But it would, you know, what a place to die in though. But he was only about 32, 34, Dick. How young is that to die through the bloody drink? But I've never had the money to go over there. I would love to go back there to visit Dick's grave, you know, to show him some respect. But I've never had the money to go back there, you know. It's a very awkward place, I suppose, to get to from this country, because you're going into the Caribbean. And then anyway, we set sail from there. Eventually they fixed the engines and we went around Central America to places like Barranquilla and, you know, places like Colombia, and I can't remember exactly where we went because it was so long ago, you know. But that was one of the saddest things I ever saw, that, and it still affects me even today, you know, when I think about it, because he was such a great guy. I remember what he was like, you know. I only knew him for a few weeks as well before he died, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, which, you know, which was really sad. But this is the way things are. But how unlucky am I? You know, I'm really an unlucky person. You know I am. You know. Anyway, that was that. A lot of people always said that ship was a bit had a Jonah on it. You know, that ship it was always breaking down and other things were going wrong. But I thought it was a great ship, you know. But anyway, I hope that story never depressed you. But just to say one thing about the Caribbean and the flying fish and the dolphins, it's unbelievable, you know. You've got to go away to sea to experience what it's like, and what it's like in the Atlantic in a storm. How the ship goes up, a 12,000 ton ship just goes up slowly, rattles, brrr, boom, and goes down. All the waves come over the, you know, the over the bow of the ship, bows. It's unbelievable. And then it'll go up, and it'll go from left to right, or from, you know, from port to starboard, and it'll go up, and it'll brrr, make this noise when it's on top of the waves, and then boom, it'll come down, and the bows go into the water, and it all comes over the ship. You know, sometimes you think the ship's just going to carry on going down, but it comes up again. And I've been on the ship, and I've stood on what's known as the poop deck, which is by the funnel, not far from the funnel. The funnel's behind you, and you stand. It's on top of the bridge, and you can look down and watch. And it was absolutely incredible. You know, I've done that on a few ships, but you know, you've got to go away to sea to experience these things. Bloody big fish jumping out of the water, in the Atlantic, like ray fish and things like that, which I've seen. Fantastic experience, even the short time I was away at sea. I've got friends who went away to sea for a lot longer than me, and they still miss it. Once you've been away to sea, you always miss it. You always miss it. You miss the ships, but most of all, you miss the things that you see and the ports that you visit, which are fantastic, you know. But anyway, I'll do another film because I was on other ships where drastic things happened, which I'll go into. But I hope you enjoyed that. I hope I haven't depressed you. And as for Dick Spring, I pray for him, you know. I do pray for him, and what a sad loss of a young man, you know. But anyway, thanks.